The station healed slowly in the days after the attack. Workers repaired broken walls and shattered doors. Medical teams treated the wounded and mourned the dead. Security forces swept every corridor, making sure no pirates remained hidden in dark corners. Life on Horizon's Edge slowly returned to normal, but some things had changed forever. The story of the two humans spread across the station like fire. Everyone heard how the small, soft predators had stood in front of the children with nothing but broken furniture in their hands. Everyone heard how they had fought and bled and refused to give up. Even when victory was impossible, the prey species looked at humans differently now. The fear was still there, deep in their bones, but something new had joined it. Respect, maybe. Or wonder. The Velthari changed most of all. 3 weeks after the attack, Captain Korath called Yuna and Dowan to the main security hall. When they arrived, they found every Velthari guard on the station waiting for them. The silver-furred predators stood in perfect rows, their golden eyes watching the two humans walk to the center of the room. Lieutenant Vess stood at the front, with Rin beside her. The cub was almost bouncing with excitement, but she stayed quiet and proper like her mother had taught her. Korath stepped forward. His voice was formal, the words practiced and ancient. In the old times, before the stars, the Velthari lived in packs on a cold world of ice and stone. To be pack was to be family. To be pack was to share food and shelter and warmth. To be pack was to fight together and die together and know that you were never alone. He looked at Yuna, then at Dowan. Today we offer the humans Yuna and Dowan a place in our pack. Not as guests, not as allies, as family. This honor has never been given to those outside our species. But these two have earned it with blood and courage and love. Yuna felt tears building in her eyes. Beside her, Dowan stood very still, his face unreadable. Korath continued. The ceremony is simple. We share blood, just a small cut to show that we are willing to bleed for each other. We share food to show that we will never let each other starve. And we share words to make the bond real and unbreakable. He drew a small knife and made a tiny cut on his own palm. Blood welled up, dark red against his silver fur. He offered the knife to Yuna. She took it without hesitation. The cut was small, barely more than a scratch, but the meaning behind it made her hand shake. She pressed her bleeding palm against Korath's and felt the warmth of his blood mixing with hers. I am Pack, she said. Her voice steady. You are Pack, the room answered as one. Dowan followed. His face still quiet, but his eyes shining with something that might have been tears. Then Vess stepped forward and pressed her palm to Yuna's, and then to Dowan's, then the other guards one by one, until every Velthari in the room had shared blood with the two humans. Finally, Rin ran forward and pressed her small paw to Yuna's hand. No knife was needed for the cub. It was enough that she was there, that she had chosen her place. Yuna and Nia's Pack, Rin announced proudly. And Dowan Agiasi too. The room filled with a sound that Yuna had never heard before. It was deep and warm, almost like purring but bigger, a sound of approval and happiness that came from the chests of every Velthari present. Then the feast began. It lasted for 3 days. The Velthari brought out foods from their homeworld, strong meats and bitter drinks that made Yuna's eyes water. The humans shared foods from Earth, sweet cakes and fruits that made Rin's tail wag uncontrollably. They told stories and played games and learned each other's songs. On the second night, Vess sat beside Yuna and watched Rin playing with Dowan. The engineer was pretending to be a monster, chasing the giggling cub around the hall while other Velthari cheered. She calls you aunt now, Vess said quietly. In our language. She says you are family. Yuna smiled. In my language we say Anni. It means older sister. Close to aunt, I think. Sister, Vess repeated. I like that. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you. For what you did? For everything you did? I did not do anything special. I just did what felt right. Vess shook her head. No, you did what was human. And I'm beginning to think that being human is something very special indeed. The story did not stay on Horizon's Edge. Security footage from the attack spread across the galactic networks. Millions of beings watched the small humans stand against the slavers. Millions more heard about the pack ceremony that followed. News programs discussed the meaning of human pack bonding. Academics wrote papers about the psychological differences between humans and other predator species. The Galactic Council received an unusual number of requests for human diplomatic attachments. Species that had avoided humans now asked for human advisors, human scientists, human friends. Captain Korath wrote an official report that became famous across 3 sectors. Humans do not understand boundaries the way other species do, he wrote. They see suffering and move toward it. They see loneliness and try to end it. They see a pack and try to join it, or to make one where none existed before. They are perhaps the most aggressively loyal species we have encountered. This makes them dangerous. This also makes them invaluable. We should not fear humans. We should hope that they choose to love us. Yuna read the report in her quarters, her new quarters, larger and nicer, in the Velthery section of the station. She laughed and showed it to Dowan. He makes us sound like dogs, she said. Dowan shrugged. He is not wrong. The door opened and Rin came running in, her fur braided in the human style that she loved. She jumped onto Yuna's bed and curled up against her side like a cat or a Wolf pup or a human child seeking comfort. Tell me a story, Yuna Ani, she demanded. A story about Earth. Yuna smiled and began to talk about a small blue planet covered in water, where creatures called humans had first learned to love things that were not like them. Outside the viewport, ships from a dozen species docked at horizon's edge. The dying star burned red against the black. And somewhere in the vast and lonely galaxy, word was spreading about a species that hugged crying cubs and fought with broken chairs and never, ever gave up on the ones they had chosen as their own. The galaxy was watching, and humanity, as always, was ready to adopt it. The attack came without warning on a quiet station night. The first explosion shook horizon's edge like a giant hand. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Red lights flashed against metal walls. The station's voice, calm and cold, announced that hostile ships had docked at 3 different ports. Pirates, slavers, the worst kind of criminals the galaxy had ever known. Yuna was in her quarters when the attack began. She fell out of bed and hit the floor hard. For a moment she lay there, confused and afraid, the alarm screaming in her ears. Then she thought of Rin. The cub was in the care center on the other side of the station. She was alone. She was scared. Yuna was running before she finished the thought. The corridors were chaos. Station workers ran in all directions, screaming. Smoke poured from damaged vents. Yuna saw bodies on the ground, people who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She did not stop. She could not stop. She found Dowan at the care center doors. The engineer had gotten there first. He had pushed heavy furniture against the entrance and was standing guard with a metal pipe in his hands. His face was pale, but his eyes were hard. They have not come here yet, he said. But they will. Yuna pushed through the barricade and found the children inside. A dozen small creatures from 6 different species huddled in the corner, crying and shaking. And in the middle of them, trying to be brave, was Rin. Yuna ni. The cub ran to her and grabbed her legs. I am scared. The loud sounds will not stop. Yuna knelt down and held her tight. I know, I am scared too. But we are going to be okay. I promise. She did not know if that was true, but she said it anyway. The minutes passed slowly. Yuna could hear fighting somewhere in the station, the sounds of weapons and screaming. She tried to keep the children calm, telling them stories, singing soft songs, doing anything to drown out the terrible noises from outside. Then the barricade exploded inward. 3 pirates stood in the broken doorway. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and black eyes that held no light. They wore armor marked with symbols that Yuna recognized from warning bulletins. These were the Keth, a slaver species that had been driven to the edges of civilized space. They took prisoners. They sold people. They were looking at the children like merchants looking at goods. Well, said the leader, his voice like rocks grinding together, Look what we found. So many little ones. They will sell well. Una stood up. She moved between the pirates and the children. Behind her she heard Rin whimper. You will not touch them, Una said. The pirate leader laughed. It was an ugly sound. What are you going to do, little predator? You have no weapons. You have no claws. You are nothing. He was right. Una had nothing. She was small and soft and weak by galactic standards. She had no training in combat. She had no way to fight 3 armed slavers, but behind her 12 children were crying. Behind her, Rin was pressing her face against Yuna's back. Trusting her to make everything okay, Una grabbed a broken piece of furniture, a chair leg with a sharp end, and raised it like a weapon. Come and find out, she said. Dowan appeared beside her, his metal pipe ready. The engineer, who had never held a weapon in his life, stood next to the scientist who had never been in a fight. 2 humans against 3 slavers. The fight was ugly and brutal. Dowan took a hit to the shoulder in the first seconds. The impact sent him spinning, but he did not fall. He swung his pipe and caught one of the pirates across the face. The pirate screamed and stumbled back. Una did not think. She moved on instinct, on something old and fierce that lived deep in human bones. She ducked under a swing and drove her chair leg into a pirate's leg. She took a punch to the ribs that made stars explode in her vision. She kept fighting, but there were too many. The pirates were stronger, faster, better armed. One of them grabbed Una by the throat and lifted her off the ground. She kicked and clawed, her flat little nails doing nothing against his armor. Stupid little predator, the pirate said. You should have run. And then the wall exploded. Captain Korath came through first, his fur silver and his eyes burning gold. Behind him came Vess and a dozen other Velthary guards. They did not shout or warn. They simply attacked. The pirate holding Una dropped her to defend himself. It did not help. Korath was on him in seconds. And what happened next was too fast and too violent to watch. When it was over, the 3 pirates lay on the ground, and the Velthary stood in a protective circle around the children. Rin broke free from the group and ran to her mother, crying with relief. Korath walked to where Una had fallen. She was still on the ground, breathing hard, her ribs screaming with pain. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. But she was looking at the children, counting them, making sure they were all safe. Korath offered her his paw. She took it and he pulled her to her feet. You stood against them, he said. Unarmed, alone, you knew you could not win. Una shook her head. I was not going to let them take those children. They were not your cubs. Una looked at Rin, who was clinging to her mother and looking back at Una with huge, grateful eyes. She looked at the other children, prey species and predator species alike, all of them alive because 2 humans had stood in the doorway and refused to move. Yes, they were, Una said. Korath was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more respectful. The pack protects its own, he said. And it seems that you are pack. Dowan limped over, still holding his pipe, his shoulder bleeding freely. Does that mean we get a discount at the Velthary food stands? Korath looked at him for a moment, then did something that none of the other guards had ever seen. He laughed. The patrol ship docked at Horizon's Edge on a cold station morning. Lieutenant Vess walked down the boarding ramp with tired eyes and a heart full of longing. She had been away for 2 months, 2 long months of hunting pirates in the empty spaces between stars. All she wanted now was to hold her daughter. She found Rin in the care center, but the cub she found was not the cub she had left behind. The old Rin had been quiet and sad. She had cried when Vess left and cried when she called on the communication screen. She had been lonely and afraid, stuck on a station where nobody wanted to play with a predator child. This new Rin was talking fast and laughing. She ran to her mother and jumped into her arms, but even as Vess held her tight, the cub kept talking about someone called Una Ani. She taught me a human game with clapping hands. She brought me sweet things to eat. She braided my fur. Look at the pattern. She told me stories about Earth, about forests and mountains and oceans, so big you cannot see the other side. Vess listened with growing confusion. Who is this Yuna Ni? She is my friend. She is a human. She hugged me when I was crying and she stayed with me when I had bad dreams. Vess felt her fur stand up along her spine. A human had touched her daughter. A human had held her cub. She did not know if she should be grateful or furious. She went to Captain Korath. For answers, the old captain showed her the recordings. He showed her the first moment in the corridor when the human had hugged the crying cub. He showed her the weeks that followed, the games and the stories and the blanket. He showed her the moment when the human had stood between Rin and the bullies with fire in her eyes. What does this mean? Vess asked. Why would a human do this? I do not know, Korath admitted. But I have watched her carefully. She is not trying to take your daughter. She is not trying to use her for some purpose. She simply seems to care. Vess did not believe it. She could not believe it. There had to be a reason, a hidden purpose, something she was not seeing. She decided to confront the human herself. She found Yuna in the small quarters assigned to human visitors. The room was tiny and plain, barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The human was sitting at the desk, reading something on a screen. When Vess pushed through the door without asking permission, Yuna looked up. She was so small, Vess thought. So soft and fragile. Her claws were just flat pieces of nothing at the ends of her fingers. Her teeth were tiny and blunt. How could such a weak creature have stood against those bullies? How could she have looked at a Velthri cub and felt anything but fear? You are Rin's mother, Yuna said. It was not a question, yes. Vess stepped closer, using her height and her size to fill the small room. She let her lips pull back slightly, showing just the tips of her fangs. And you are the human who touched my daughter. Yuna did not step back. She did not look away. She simply stood up from her chair and faced Vess with those strange forward-facing eyes. I am, she said. Why? Vess demanded. Why did you touch my cub? Why did you care for a child that was not your blood? What do you want from her? I want nothing from her. Then why? Yuna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Because she was crying. Because she was alone. Because no child should have to feel like that. Because where I come from, that is what you do. Vess did not understand. What you do? What does that mean? Yuna took a slow breath. Humans are pack creatures. Not like you, not the same, but similar in some ways. We need to belong to groups. We need to feel connected to others. When we see someone suffering alone, especially a child, something inside us hurts. We have to help. We cannot walk away. But she is not your species. She is not your family. That does not matter to humans. Yuna smiled, a small sad smile. We adopt things. We make them ours. Not in a stealing way, but in a caring way. We see something alone and we think that one is mine now, I will protect it. We do this with animals. We do this with places. We do this with ideas. And yes, sometimes we do this with alien children who cry in dark corridors. Vess sat down heavily on the small bed. Her legs felt weak. This was not what she had expected to hear. You are very strange predators, she said finally. Yuna laughed quietly. We prefer to call it being aggressively social. They talked for a long time after that. Yuna explained more about human pack bonding, about the loneliness that humans feared more than death, about the way they would fight and die for creatures they had chosen as their own. Vess listened and asked questions and slowly began to understand when she left Yuna's quarters. Her heart was no longer angry. It was full of something else, something that felt almost like hope. That night, Vess ate dinner with the other Velthri guards. She told them everything the human had said. The table fell silent, then erupted into discussion that lasted until the morning sun cycle began. They were all thinking the same thing, though none of them said it out loud yet. Maybe the humans were not just strange predators. Maybe they were something more. Captain Korath sat alone in the security office and watched the recording for the 18th time. The human female knelt on the cold floor. She opened her arms. She pulled the Velthri cub against her body and held her there. She made soft sounds and rubbed the cub's back. She said words that Kareth had to translate, simple words, gentle words. "You are not alone. I am here." Kareth stopped the recording and stared at the frozen image. In all his years of service, he had never seen anything like this. Prey species ran from Velthary cubs. They feared the claws, the teeth, the predator eyes. Other predator species kept their distance. They respected boundaries. They understood that touching another species' young was either an insult or a challenge, but this human had done neither. She had simply offered comfort. She had treated the cub like pack. Kareth did not know what to do with this information. He called a meeting with his senior guards. They gathered in the security office and watched the recording together. Nobody spoke for a long time after it ended. "What does this mean?" asked one of the younger guards. "Is it a trick?" "Humans are new," said another. "Maybe they do not know our customs." She knew the cub was crying, Kareth said quietly. She knew the cub was alone. And she chose to help. "That is not ignorance. That is something else." He ordered his guards to watch the human female. Not to interfere, not to approach, just to observe. He wanted to understand what kind of creature would do such a thing. What they saw over the following weeks confused them even more. Yuna visited Rin every day. She came to the care center during her lunch break and sat with the small cub while the other children played far away. She brought treats from the human food stores, strange sweet things that Rin had never tasted before. She taught Rin games that human children played. Simple games with clapping hands and silly songs when the weather control system broke, and the station grew cold for 3 days. Yuna brought a soft blanket from her own bed and wrapped it around Rin's shoulders when Rin had nightmares about her mother never coming back. Yuna sat beside her sleeping pod and told her stories until the sun cycle began, when the prey species children called Rin a monster and threw food at her. Yuna stood between them with fire in her eyes. She did not yell. She did not threaten. She simply stood there, this small soft human with her forward-facing eyes and her hidden teeth. And she said in a voice like cold metal, "You will not do that again." The children ran away and did not bother Rin anymore. Kareth watched all of this through the security cameras. He watched the human comfort his species cub like she was her own. He watched her fight for the small one with a quiet anger that reminded him of mother wolves defending their dens. He did not understand. But he was beginning to respect. Dalvan noticed the change before Yuna did. He saw the Velthary guards appearing near their quarters more often. He saw them watching from across the food court when Yuna ate her meals. He saw them standing in corridors that Yuna walked through, silent and observant. "I think you may have done something wrong," Dalvan told her one evening. "The Volf people are following you." Yuna frowned. "I just played with a child." "How could that be wrong?" "In their culture, touching is very important. It is only for family, for pack members." "Maybe they think you are trying to steal the cub or something." Yuna's face went pale. She had not thought about that. She had been so focused on helping Rin that she had not considered how it might look to others, but the Velthary did not seem angry. They seemed curious. They seemed almost protective. The truth of this became clear one night when Yuna was walking back from the biology lab. It was late. The corridors were empty. She was thinking about a report she needed to write when a large figure stepped out of the shadows in front of her. It was a traitor. A species she did not recognize, with too many eyes and breath that smelled like chemicals. He was drunk and angry. "Human," he slurred. "You cost me money. Your Federation rules killed my deal. You owe me." Yuna took a step back. "I do not know what you are talking about. You owe me." The traitor grabbed her arm with a grip that hurt. "You will pay one way or another." Yuna opened her mouth to scream, but before any sound came out, 3 shapes appeared from nowhere. The Velthary guards moved like ghosts. One moment the corridor was empty, and the next moment 3 silver-furred predators stood around the traitor in a perfect triangle. Their golden eyes glowed in the dim light. Their lips pulled back to show teeth that made the traitor's grip go weak. "Release the human," said the largest guard. His voice was calm and quiet and absolutely terrifying. The traitor released Yuna and stumbled backward. The guards escorted him away without another word, but before they left, the largest guard turned back to Yuna. He looked at her for a long moment with those golden eyes. Then he dipped his head just slightly. In what might have been a bow or a nod of respect, then he was gone. Yuna stood alone in the corridor, her heart pounding. She did not understand what had just happened. She did not understand why the Velthari had protected her, but somewhere deep in her chest, she felt something warm and strange. It felt like belonging. The space station called Horizon's Edge floated near a dying red star at the edge of known space. It was old and large, built by species that no longer existed. Now it served as a place where aliens from across the galaxy came to trade, make deals, and watch each other with careful eyes. Yuna stepped off the human transport ship and took her first breath of recycled station air. It smelled like metal and strange spices. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life, and this was her first real assignment. The Korean Federation had sent her here to learn about the species that lived on this station. She was also supposed to help humans look friendly and harmless. That second part was harder than it sounded. Yuna noticed how the other aliens looked at her as she walked through the docking bay. A group of small, rabbit-like creatures pressed themselves against the far wall when she passed. A tall being with 4 arms stopped talking and stared until she was gone. Even the station workers, gray-skinned and tired-looking, kept their distance. She found her partner waiting near the customs office. Dawan was an engineer, quiet and serious. He had been on the station for 3 months already. "They still afraid of us?" Yuna asked in Korean. Dawan nodded. "We have forward-facing eyes. We eat meat. We smile with our teeth showing. To them, we are monsters," Yuna sighed. She had read the reports, but seeing the fear in person was different. Humans were new to the galactic community. Only 50 years had passed since first contact. Most species still did not know what to think about the strange predators from the small blue planet. The first weeks passed slowly. Yuna worked in the station's biology lab, studying samples and writing reports that nobody read. She ate alone in the human section of the food court. She tried to smile less, to keep her teeth hidden, to make herself small and untreating. It did not help much. The Velthari were the worst. They were the station's security force, tall Volf-like beings with silver fur and golden eyes. They were predators too, but the galaxy had known them for thousands of years. The Velthari had rules about honor and strength and control. They were respected. They were trusted. They did not trust humans. Yuna saw them watching her sometimes. Their captain, a scarred old male named Koreth, seemed to have ordered his soldiers to keep eyes on the human visitors at all times. She tried not to take it personally. One evening, Yuna was walking back to her quarters when she heard crying. She stopped. The sound was coming from a small maintenance corridor, the kind that most people never used. Yuna knew she should keep walking. She was supposed to avoid trouble. She was supposed to be invisible, but the crying continued, high and sad and lonely. Yuna turned into the corridor. She found a small figure huddled against the wall. It was a Velthari cub, no larger than a human child of 7 or 8 years. Her fur was darker than the adults, more gray than silver, and her eyes were squeezed shut as tears ran down her muzzle. Yuna knelt down a few feet away. "Hello," she said softly in the common galactic language. "Are you okay?" The cub's eyes snapped open. For a moment, Yuna saw fear there, the same fear she saw in everyone else. But then the cub just looked tired and sad. "Go away," the cub said. "Everyone goes away. What happened?" Yuna asked. The cub was silent for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, she said, "The others pushed me out. They said I was scary. They said my teeth were too big. They said I would eat them." Yuna felt something twist in her chest. She knew that feeling. She knew what it was like to be feared for things she could not control. "What is your name?" she asked. "Rin. I am Yuna." She moved a little closer. "Those others sound like they were being very mean." Rin nodded, fresh tears falling. "My mother is away. She is on a patrol ship. I have to stay in the care center, but nobody wants to play with me. Nobody wants to sit with me. I eat alone every day. Yuna did not think. She did not consider the cultural implications or the political consequences or any of the things she should have considered. She simply opened her arms and pulled the small, crying cub into a hug. Rin went stiff. Yuna could feel the little heart pounding fast under all that fur. For a terrible second, she thought she had made a mistake. Then Rin grabbed onto Yuna's jacket with both small paws and started crying harder. But this was different crying. This was the crying of someone who had been holding too much inside for too long and was finally letting it out. Yuna held her tight. She rubbed small circles on Rin's back and made soft sounds. The same sounds her own mother had made when Yuna was small and scared. She did not know if L3 understood such things. She did not care. "It is okay," Yuna whispered. "You are not alone. I am here." They stayed like that for a long time. The corridor was quiet. The recycled air hummed through the vents. Somewhere, the station continued its endless rotation around the dying star. Neither of them noticed the security camera in the corner of the ceiling, and neither of them saw Captain Korath standing in the shadows at the end of the corridor, watching the human predator hold his species cub with an expression that no one had ever seen on his face before.